Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the state of Texas and analyzing how Texas has trended blue over the past 12 or so years by looking at some previous election results as well as some exit polls, and we'll also take a look at the future to 2022 and beyond to kind of see where Texas is headed with these electoral voting patterns, whether or not the state of Texas will inevitably become a blue state to the likes of California, become more of a purple state like Georgia is right now, or stay a lean red to even likely red state for the foreseeable future. So we'll get into all of that in just a second, but first, please consider subscribing down below if you're new and liking this video. It really helps the channel out and helps me make more videos like these. So anyway, let's get straight into it. Before we go to any of that, I just want to demonstrate how important the state of Texas is electorally for the Republican Party, because the Republicans have relied on Texas as a big electoral vote basket since 1980. The state of Texas has not voted for a Democratic president since 1976 with Jimmy Carter. After that, it was a reliably Republican state, voting for all the Republican nominees for president from then onward. So for over 40 years, Texas has only voted for Republicans on the presidential level. This is the 2020 electoral map. On the 2024 electoral college map, since some of the numbers have changed a bit. I know Pennsylvania lost an electoral vote, Texas gained 2, etc. So I've put the same map out on the new electoral college map, and so far it puts the Democrats at 303 to 235. Not much different than what we saw back in the 2020 election. Now, if I make Texas blue, this turns what is already a pretty sizable electoral college victory into a total landslide. You know, this is akin to the Obama-McCain margin back in 2008 in the Electoral College. And even if I make a number of states red, like in the Rust Belt, for instance, we'll make Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin red, we'll make Georgia red even, Arizona red. You have to make Nevada red as well just to get to 272 for the Republican Party, and that doesn't include the state of New Hampshire. Let's say Republicans max out, they get New Hampshire. Let's even give them Minnesota, which I don't think will happen anytime soon, but just for argument's sake, this puts the Republicans only at 286 electoral votes. You know, this is really their realistic ceiling, as of the making of this video. And with Texas blue, it really holds them back from getting any sizable victory in the Electoral College. So it just goes to show you how important Texas is and why the Republicans can't afford to lose it. In 2016, with the map that we saw, if Texas had gone blue, Donald Trump would have narrowly lost the presidency back in 2016. That's how important the state of Texas is. Just 38 electoral votes would have made all of the difference. It would have put Hillary Clinton at exactly 270. Trump would have lost the 2016 presidential election as a result. So that just goes to show you how important Texas is for Republicans and why they can't afford to lose it. If Republicans lose the state of Texas, their electoral map for the presidency gets extremely complicated. And the difference is, for the Democrats, they have a number of other states trending in their favor, like the state of Georgia, like Arizona, potentially even North Carolina in the future, although North Carolina has held strong for the Republicans. And by strong, I mean they voted consistently for Republicans since 2008, with the only exception really being Roy Cooper and a couple other statewide offices. But in terms of federal races, since 2008, North Carolina has stayed a red state. And even though it voted for Donald Trump narrowly back in 2020, that was still a D+5 environment, indicating that if the Republicans had a more favorable environment, North Carolina would have been redder in that instance. So there's a number of states where the Democrats are making gains. The Republicans are doing better in the Rust Belt, but as we just demonstrated, they need to win more than just the Rust Belt. They need to win states like Minnesota. They need to win Nevada. They have to win Arizona. They have to win Georgia, which Georgia's bluer than Texas. Arizona's bluer than Texas. So, if Texas goes, so goes the nation. So really, it is the entire ball game for Republicans long term in order to keep. So if we take a look at the partisan makeup of Texas, every statewide office has been held by a Republican since 1999, with no exception. There was a brief period where the Democrats controlled the state house, but of course that's not a statewide office. And then after the 2002 elections, Republicans have had a stranglehold on the state ever since. So really, the 1990s was the death of the Texas Democratic Party. After the loss of Ann Richards to George W. Bush in 1994, The other statewide offices like lieutenant governor and attorney general, comptroller, once these Democrats has served 8 years in those positions, they were promptly replaced with Republicans. And since then, that has been the law of the land in Texas. Republicans win statewide offices. Democrats have not won an office in the entire 21st century. Now, the Republican control of things like the state legislature is slipping. Republicans only have 18 seats in the state Senate. They previously held 21 as recently as before the 2018 elections. 85 seats in the House. They've held, as much as 99 or so, or 95 after the 2016 election. So losing nearly 10 seats in the state House and 2 in the state Senate, 2 or 3 in the state Senate rather, puts them more at risk of losing these chambers. I mean, especially the state Senate, you really only need a couple of seats flipped for this control to change. Now, I don't know where these battleground seats are, if all of the, swing suburban seats are already in Democratic hands or if they have room to grow, but Republicans are losing their grip on the state. And if we go back earlier in the decade, the state Senate was never really that strong for the Republicans, but the state House, as much as 101 seats were in Republican hands after the 2010 red wave year. And then since then, they've kind of slowly been draining seats. So it seems like the Republicans' peak was the mid-2010s, the kind of Obama backlash year elections. And if we go back to 2008, for instance, we'll take a look at some presidential election results. John McCain won the state of Texas by less than 12 points. Of course, if we just go back to 4 years earlier, George W. Bush, who was a favorite son from the state, very popular former governor, and of course an incumbent president at this point, won by a colossal margin, 61-38. Total landslide. 2000 winning by 21 points. Same thing. A pretty big landslide, especially for Texas, considering where we are now, where Texas seems to be a single-digit Republican state on average. But going ahead into elections like 2012, for instance, we can take a look at, I don't know why New York Times does this for this one. Even as recently as just a decade ago, Texas was a safe Republican state. It voted for Mitt Romney by about 16 points. Almost 16 points. And he was competitive in places like Harris County. He almost won Harris County, the biggest county in Texas, winning Fort Worth by a landslide margin. Almost winning Bexar County, San Antonio, winning the suburbs of Austin by safe margins. And that's important because if we look at, when we look at future, not future, but if we look at more recent election results, these suburbs are either going blue or have turned blue and are well on their way there. So a lot of these suburban and urban counties are slipping away from the Republicans. Again, if we look back at 2004, George W. Bush essentially won all of these except Travis County, home to Austin, and, the El Paso area, which was always a Democratic area. That's it. The rest of the major urban counties, Harris County, Bexar County, Dallas, Tarrant County, obviously the suburbs of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, all going solidly for the Republican Party. So the story of Texas going blue is really written in the suburbs. And of course, this is a trend we've seen all across the country. It's the reason why Republicans aren't really that competitive in places like Colorado anymore, why they've lost Virginia and are only really competitive in those off-year elections. And, Texas is headed that same way, at least at this trajectory. After 2012, of course, in the 2016 election, Donald Trump only won Texas by 9 points, by single digits. And Texas is one of the poster childs of American conservatism. It's seen as one of the most conservative states. And, that reputation isn't really bearing out in recent years. Obviously, if you follow politics, states like Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, much more conservative than Texas overall. But in the American mind, Texas is the poster child of a conservative state. And of course, California would be a liberal one, or New York. But just a 9-point victory for Donald Trump is pretty disappointing, considering that in 2008, in a year where you had states like North Carolina going blue, you had Indiana going blue, you had Missouri almost flip blue, the state of Texas was still almost a safe state. It was almost a 12-point margin for John McCain. So to go down to 9 points in 2016 is pretty bad for the Republicans. And again, places like Harris County, safe blue now. Romney almost won Harris County in 2012. We look at the trend map. Dallas County, was already safe blue, but was just trending more in that direction. Tarrant County going from safe to likely. And of course, Collin and Denton counties you had Romney winning these areas by over 30 points, and now you have Trump only winning them by about 20, and in the case of Collin County, less than 20. And I say this because these are the populous counties. These are the counties where most Texans live in. The Dallas-Fort Worth area, the Houston Metro, Hill Country, Austin, and of course San Antonio and the El Paso area. You know, the border region of Texas, which did swing massively in favor of Donald Trump in 2020, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. These counties are not very big counties, though, when you look at them. I mean, the only really big county in here is Hidalgo County. Hidalgo County, Cameron County, those are really the most populous counties in the border area. Webb County, I guess you could throw in the mix too. But the rest of these counties have, you know, about 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people at most, maybe. And when you look at the areas that are trending more blue, you know, like Travis County, which is over 1 million, Harris County, which has like 4 million people, you know, it's not really comparable. You know, these states can trend blue by a couple of points and have the same impact of the border region trending red by, you know, 40 or 50 points like we saw in the 2020 election. So 2016 furthering this shift to the left. And then, of course, 2018 was the closest Texas came to flipping blue in a generation, really. You had Beto O'Rourke coming within 3 points of Texas Senator Ted Cruz, an incumbent senator, a one-term incumbent at the time. And the margins he was getting, he flipped Tarrant County, which, you know, the Dallas-Fort Worth area is once considered one of the most conservative metro areas in the entire country. Tarrant County flipping to Beto O'Rourke. I think this is the first time Tarrant County has gone blue, probably since the state was last blue or even before that. So a huge shift there already. Tarrant County, Fort Worth was the most conservative urban county in Texas. That flipped. Collin and Denton counties almost flipped as well, both counties being brought down to single digits. And again, these areas have significant populations. There's a growing tech center in this area. Dallas-Fort Worth has been attracting a lot of new jobs and a lot of out-of-state migrants from places like California, Nevada, Arizona, etc. And they're settling in this area. And especially in Collin and Denton counties, those voting shifts are really evident in the population there. This is a much more liberal population moving to these areas as opposed to, say, the Houston area. Now, Beto won this county by nearly 17 points. He flipped Fort Bend County, which I forgot to mention was a county that Hillary Clinton also won by about 8 points, 7 or 8 points. This was a county that Beto wins by a safe margin. Bexar County, nearly a 20-point margin. Hayes County and Williamson County flipping. So you have all of these suburban and urban counties really being maxed out for the time being for O'Rourke, and it still wasn't enough to put him over the top. Ted Cruz was able to hold on because he had just enough support in the rest of rural Texas as well as the other suburban areas and exurban areas around Dallas-Fort Worth, of course, the Austin area as well. And Houston. You know, Houston really seemed to bottom out for the Republicans in this election. 41% seems to be the area in which Republicans so far haven't gone below that. You know, if we look at even 2020, for instance, Donald Trump was able to make up some ground in Harris County, even though the county overall trended to the left and only did by about 1 point. So Houston seems to be kind of bottoming out for the Republicans, and they're starting to kind of climb back a bit in the county. But the rest of the areas around Texas, and we'll look at those in just a second, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Hill Country, San Antonio, all these areas here, they continue to trend to the left. And this had a down ballot effect. If we look at all of the other races, excluding the governor's race, lieutenant governor, you know, this was a decently close margin for Texas. This was less than 5 points. Attorney general, this was just about 3.6%. And so on. You know, comptroller, agricultural commissioner was relatively close, land commissioner wasn't, and comptroller wasn't. But really, besides those two races and the governor's race, the rest of the races in Texas were competitive for the Democrats. And this was the first time we'd seen something like this since the 1990s, where Democrats were actually really close to winning a statewide office. And had 2018 been a worse year for the Republicans, you could have seen a Senate seat flip, potentially, with Ted Cruz losing his re-election bid for Senate. Now, you know, again, this has a huge impact on national politics as a whole, as we looked at earlier. You flip Texas, Republicans' electoral map on the presidential level becomes extremely difficult. Obviously, you know, things like Senate are another story, and we'll talk about that perhaps in a future video, why the Senate is a bright spot for Republicans going forward, but the state of Texas certainly isn't. Now, the reason I say that is because I don't think Republicans are really putting in the effort and the money needed to keep Texas a red state. Obviously, you need to hammer home these metro areas, and I think Houston's not an area you have to worry about so much. It's really the Austin area here. Dallas, Fort Worth, and San Antonio are cities and regions I think should be targeted heavily by Republicans if they want to keep this state red, because these are the areas trending the most to the left. And obviously, in a year like 2022, where Republicans are expected to do better, we might see more of an Abbott 2018 margin for other statewide races. But ultimately, Republicans should be doing better in the state of Texas than that. And again, we can go back to the 2020 presidential election result. This was the closest presidential election result for Texas since, I believe, 1996, when I think Bob Dole only won the state of Texas by about 5 points and some change. Donald Trump only won the state of Texas by a little bit over 5.5%. I think it was 5.6. He, like Ted Cruz, lost Tarrant County, which again was a reliably red and even safe red county up until very recently. We totally skipped over the 2014 midterms, but this was an area in which I think Republicans, this was the biggest support we'd seen for Republicans in the 2010s decade. John Cornyn's race in particular for Senate, where the Democrat only got 34.4% of the vote. You had John Cornyn winning Harris County by nearly a safe margin, Bexar County by nearly a safe margin, almost flipping Dallas County, which is an extraordinary feat considering that Dallas really hasn't been a red county since the beginning of the 21st century. And then 2004, it voted for Bush narrowly. And then ever since then, not only presidentially, but also in down ballot races, and of course, in local races, the county is now a reliably blue county. But he was almost able to flip Dallas County. And again, this was a huge red wave year. This also coupled with lower turnout. I don't think, even if 2022 is a good year for Republicans, I don't think it's going to be nearly as good as the 2014 midterms. Also, you're going to have much higher turnout than the 2014 midterms in comparison. So you're not going to see a result like this. But even if Republicans could get a 12-point margin of victory, make it a safe margin of victory in 2022, it would certainly be a bright spot for them. One area of Texas I would watch on election night is the Rio Grande Valley. If we look at the trend map, it's absolutely insane how far to the left, far to the right, rather, these counties trended, particularly Starr County, which I think trended the furthest right in the entire country. 55 points. If we go back to 2016, Starr County went to Hillary Clinton by, and I don't know why I can't find Starr County. There it is. Over 60 percentage points, Starr County going to Hillary Clinton. And then, of course, you have in 2020, Biden winning Starr County by a very small amount. But look at the amount of votes. Only 9,000 votes for Joe Biden, 8,000 votes for Donald Trump. Compare that to a place like Dallas County, where you have nearly 600,000 votes for Joe Biden. Tarrant County, 411,000. So these results in the border region are almost negligible, if these suburban counties continue to trend to the left for Republicans. Republicans did very poorly in Travis County. No surprise, Austin is a very liberal part. But look, it's bleeding out into Williamson County, Hayes County. So this is very bad news if you're a Republican long term. These counties will probably trend more to the right in 2022, but that's going to be more of a snapback. And then we'll see what the real trends are in 2024 and beyond, because obviously in a midterm favored to be good for Republicans, you would expect them to do well in places like Fort Worth. They'd win Fort Worth County by probably single digits. They would maybe get Collin and Denton County in the 15-point range. But I don't see these counties even going to where they went to Trump back in 2016 by 20 or so points. Or especially Romney margins where you have 30 points in these areas. Really, Republicans' best hope is to try and do better in the Harris County area. Obviously, you want to hammer home support in the Rio Grande Valley, even El Paso, which actually did trend about nearly 8 points to the right in 2020. So those are areas of the state that you should be targeting. Obviously, all of the big metro areas, but looking forward at the 2022 election, Republicans are poised to win, but the margin of victory is still up in the air. That's because you have the average of both 538 and the RCP average of Abbott at 8.4%. Given that the midterm is expected to have Republican momentum, I say that the undecideds are going to swing for Abbott. He probably will win this race by about 12 points, so about a safe margin as of right now. But we don't really have any recent polling in June. It's June 2nd right now. We haven't had a poll in about a month or so. And of course, you had the tragedy in Uvalde unfold. I'm interested to see how that's going to impact Greg Abbott and Beto O'Rourke in this governor's race, because both of them have kind of been zeroing in on the issue of school shootings, which, Texas had a number of mass shootings in the past couple of years. And, that was an issue in the Texas Senate race back in 2018 as well. And, Beto O'Rourke has really positioned himself as the anti-gun candidate. He wants to ban assault weapons. He wants to take away assault weapons with a mandatory buyback program. So he's going hard against guns in a state like Texas, which obviously is not as gun-friendly, the population rather, as it would have been, say, in like 2012, but is still a state where guns are widely owned, where the population is more conservative than the national average. And I think something like what Beto is pushing wouldn't work in the state of Texas, but it wouldn't work in states bluer than Texas, like Pennsylvania, like even Michigan, Wisconsin, even a state like Minnesota, Maine. I don't think Beto's strategy is really smart for a Democrat winning in Texas. So ultimately, I think that's why, at the end of the day, as of right now, Texas will probably be a plus 12 Republican margin of victory, about where Abbott was in 2018, which just goes to show you that even though it's expected to be a favorable year for the Republicans, Abbott still isn't really outperforming what he got during a blue wave year. And I could be wrong, the polls could swing stronger in favor of Abbott, but as I'm looking at it right now, I think it would probably be an R plus 12, right on the cusp of safe and likely for Greg Abbott in 2022. Now, the last thing I want to look at is the election shuffler, because if we take a look at Texas as a whole, again, I really don't like this program very much because it doesn't have third-party options. It only has two candidates, and you almost never get a result like that in any state, really, where you don't have any third-party candidates whatsoever. But in 2020, they have the Republicans getting 52.83% of the vote to Democrats getting 47.17%. Now, I've moved all of the counties in the Rio Grande Valley 10 points to the right, even, just to kind of show that shift. So these counties here, I've moved 10 points to the right. Republicans only get 53% of the vote with that shift, all else equal in the rest of the state of Texas. So even with a further 10 points to the right, or even if we go 20 points, you're looking at very small gains for the Republicans overall, especially if they continue to lose the suburbs. This is not enough to offset the blue gains taking place in the metro areas. So ultimately, Republicans' keys to keeping Texas a red state is metro areas. They have to do better with suburban voters if they want to keep Texas a reliably red state. Now, one thing I forgot to look at was the exit polling out of 2018, because there's one interesting fact that I think is a silver lining for the Republicans, and that is that Texas has become a state where a lot of Republicans from blue states like California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada have been moving to. And if we look at the 2018 exit polls, it has made a difference considerably. Only 58% of the population surveyed in this exit poll was actually born in Texas. So that goes to show you just 40 years ago, and you can look at population graphs, Texas' population has exploded, and I think it's still going up rapidly, but it's not, as steep of an incline as it was previously. But Ted Cruz won the move to Texas vote with 57% to 42%. Beto O'Rourke actually won native Texans. So if there's one silver lining for Republicans, is that the Texas suburbs might be maxed out for Democrats as of 2018 and 2020. We might see a slow trend back to the Republican Party as more and more people moving from these blue states who are Republicans are moving to the state of Texas, and they're settling in these metro areas. Obviously will probably vote Republican, the majority of them. Obviously, some people moving to Texas are going to vote Democrat. Of course, we've seen that in the Austin area in particular, and sort of Dallas-Fort Worth. But Houston is an area where Republicans, I think, are going to gain a significant amount of ground in the future. And potentially Dallas-Fort Worth, of course, if they can win back Tarrant County. And, of course, keep Collin and Denton safely in the Republican fold in the future. Then Republicans will hold on to Texas for the foreseeable future. But even if these trends continue in the suburbs, the earliest I would see Texas flipping blue is, potentially 2032. I think even 2028, even if we have a Republican president in 2024, I still think that would be too early for the shift. I think at most, if these trends continue, you're going to see sort of a 2018 margin with the Ted Cruz Senate race, in which the Republicans probably win by 2, maybe 3 points, and then you'd see potentially a flip in 2032. But right now, you're still looking at least 10 years, I think, on the presidential level for Texas to flip blue if these trends don't stop. And then, of course, statewide and local ramifications will be felt after that. So, of course, you'll have statewide offices potentially going blue, 2034, 2036, etc. So that's way down the road, of course. And politics just changed a lot then. Back in 2012, states like Michigan, Wisconsin were not even realistically swing states. They were blue states. And now we're seeing them, being essentially toss-up purple states at this point. And, we really didn't see Arizona, flipping blue back in 2012. It was a likely Republican state. So a lot can change in the next 10 years, and I suspect a lot will. Some things I think will be predictable changes, and some I think will kind of catch us by surprise. So we'll see where Texas ends up in, the next 10 years or so. But as of right now, I think that Texas is still a red state. It's still going to be a strong Republican state in 2022. Probably in 2024, I suspect Republicans are going to increase their margins in the state, but by how much is really up in the air. If Republicans are able to get 9 or 10 points in 2024, then I think it's a good sign for them that they're winning back the state. But if they, do only slightly better than 2020 or even underperform that, it's a really bad sign for Republicans going ahead for the presidency. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did and you're new, please consider subscribing down below and liking this video if you enjoyed. As always, again, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.